So I was on the phone several times with the state vet.
Yeah, the ox.
Let's see, the virus will clear up.
I was looking for the, oh, there's the, and then it's recall for, okay, recall for, got it, thanks.
You guys ready?
But
Ready.
Brandon,
anybody that wants to.
you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to call the July 28th Planning Commission meeting to order. And this evening, we have listed here Mr. Tim Watkins for opening remarks and to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You totally forgot.
Forgot about that.
That is me.
That's you.
Okay.
Lauren did that on purpose, by the way.
I'm trying to think of how I'd like to express them and which microphone I should speak in. So
Here, I'll get out of your
maybe
way.
it's this one.
You can speak in that one too.
So I think what I would like to do is express condolences to anyone who's struggling at this time in any way. We hear a lot about mental health challenges and the need to reach out and kindness and friendship to others and be aware of needs and to express kind words and deeds, and not knowing when someone might be struggling. And so I've heard much about that in terms of some of the services that are provided by our county. And I think to that end, I'd like to just encourage all to think through who you could reach out to today, tomorrow, and every day to make a difference in their lives. So those are my opening remarks, and I'd like to invite us all to stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tim. So we just have one item on the agenda this evening. A regular action item is to discuss our general plan, regional collaboration plan, urban and rural area assessment, and cost of services plan. So we'll be reviewing those. They were sent out to us by staff prior to the meeting, and having a discussion this evening. And so just checking to make sure we don't have any changes to the agenda. Is that right, from staff?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, any questions or comments on the agenda, commissioners? If none, without objection, we'll approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Okay, and we'll turn the time over to staff.
All right. Thank you, Chair. And I press the right button. Angie, thank you. Oh, I forgot the recall. All right, there we are. Great. Well, first off, I want to express thank you for making the time with an additional meeting this month. This process has been, I was just joking with Angie, she's the only staff member that's still working for the county since this process started. So that just shows how long of a process this has been through COVID, staff changes, changes with our consultants. So it's been a long time coming. So I just really appreciate taking the extra time for a meeting this month so we can get this thing rolling forward. And so the format tonight, and I will clarify too, what you have in your packets and those who have hard copies in front of you are a draft of both the general plan and the regional collaboration plan. The urban and rural area assessment and cost of services are still having some tweaks done to those documents, but you will have them before the August 4th public hearing next week. So as you all know, the general plan is what's required by state code to be adopted. The regional collaboration, urban and rural area assessment, and cost of services were additional processes that were done to help support the general plan. So, so tonight's format really going to be, this is workshop. We're not taking a vote or action on anything tonight. So it's really taking the time, working through this, giving any feedback. We'll still be looking at doing edits. I already just going through the document today. I saw a couple things that I wanted to tweak. So I know that we still have an opportunity to make those changes ahead of the public hearing next week with hopefully some public in attendance and before you make a recommendation to county council. So just a quick kind of adoption process. So tonight we'll be doing the workshop. And then we will have that public hearing on August 4th next week. That will be a formal recommendation to Cache County Council to adopt the general plan and those supplement plans as well. And then the final step will be County Council holding that public hearing to adopt the general plan and subsequent plans as well. And so I know you all have seen this graphic before, but just a reminder again of what we are looking at adopting with this process. The general plan addresses what our policies, goals, and strategies are for the growth of the entire county. The regional collaboration plan addresses how we collaborate with cities and other regional authorities. And the cost of services model addresses what are the costs associated with growth in the county. And finally, the urban and rural area assessment are the growth patterns and needs of the county. So these are all working together. And like I said, the regional collaboration plan, urban and rural area assessment, and cost of services planning model are all supplement to the general plan and help to support and guide the strategies and implementation of the general plan. So once again, the general plan is just an advisory policy document that helps to guide future growth of the county. It does not change or create any regulations or requirements, but recommends new policies and regulations as implementation strategies. And so in terms of content of the general plan, and I'll say too, feel free to, as I go through this, just have me pause and we'll kind of take breaks within here and look at the document itself, but feel free to just shout if anyone has any questions or anything right off the bat. But in terms of the layout of the general plan, we have the introduction, which basically provides an overview of the county, the organization and use of the plan, and the relationship between the general plan and other long-range planning documents that the county has adopted or is undergoing currently. The plan direction chapter, that's going to provide the mission, vision, and goals of the plan, along with the public outreach effort summary. And the countywide goals and policies, that next chapter outlines the guiding principles of the plan and the goals and policies that address those principles. And then we get into the future land use plan, which provides a future land use map for the unincorporated county that will help to guide future zoning and provides guidance and predictability for those areas. And then we have the implementation and plan management as the last chapter, which really provides the implementation and strategies and guidance for the general plan. And then the last part is the appendices, so required by state code, the moderate income housing element, and also the natural resource plan as well within the appendices there.
The state requires counties to do the moderate income housing?
Yeah, and they, so with this last legislative session, they finally recognized that Cache County was large enough to have to have a moderate income housing plan. Before, they really weren't including counties within that, but now it's a required element to be a part of the general plan. So I am going to hop over to the document real quick. Like I said, we're just going to kind of go through this. And like I said, feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions or comments that people have. So like I said, that introduction is really just a broad overview. Also gives you the planning context.
Right there, Lauren. The first line on page 4.
Mm-hmm.
Can you read that one?
This one here?
The county has 19.
Yeah, the county has 19 incorporated communities.
That can be found, that can all be found in the Utah portion.
Okay. And I'm gonna do my best to mark these up while we're talking.
Something.
Yes,
It needed something.
that's how it read.
I didn't
Best
know
to
what it
me,
was
anyway.
Trying to say,
Yes.
or and can all be found, or,
Or which can all be found in the.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and if you guys happen to like be marking up a document as well too, I'll be happy to take those as well, but that's great. Great. So talking about the benefits of long-range planning, going into the organization and use of the plan. So this goes into what I just talked about, into how it's organized into those 5 chapters and what those sections include and what the goals of each of those sections are. This will make it easy to, folks who are reading the plan and utilizing the plan can go to a specific chapter and look at what they're looking for in particular. Using the plan, so this is going to lay out, using the general plan as a decision-making tool for the county, and also helping to make policy decisions as well. So really using it as a guiding document, knowing that's not regulatory, but it is an advisory document. And then this is where we get into that relationship with other planning documents, along with those companion documents as well that we will be adopting with the general plan, along with those related planning documents that have both either been completed or are in progress right now with the county. Great, so I'm gonna hop back to my slideshow. So I know we've talked about these guiding principles a handful of times, but just want to emphasize really the plan direction and recommendations are built around these guiding principles that were all gone through the process in terms of public outreach efforts, which at the last Planning Commission meeting when we went through an overview of all these, I talked about those efforts as well. So just to keep in mind, heritage and stewardship, regional collaboration, valley connectivity and transportation, active lifestyles and recreation, and economic vitality. And so once again, I just want to emphasize the public outreach summary that we did throughout, stakeholder interviews, visioning outreach, so confirming the direction of the general plan and identifying those values. Let's play a video. Choices outreach, so inform a draft policy and implementation strategy to achieve the general plan, mission, and vision. We went through the process of defining the land use map as well and getting feedback on those areas. And so, sorry, hopping back and forth here. So I just wanted to emphasize again those public outreach efforts and to help guide and steer what you see in the draft general plan. And so here's that, the mission and vision statement that was guided by all that public outreach effort that we did. Guiding principles. And so this page really breaks down what it means, those guiding principles that we've identified and how we will achieve those for the county. This goes into the summary of outreach efforts as well. That's included in there. And this here, so this is a graphic that I think has caused some confusion as we've worked through this process. This graphic was created based on the public outreach that we did through surveying. What I did to try to help make sense of this graphic and the representation there is kind of define and recognize that the way that we went about the online survey wasn't very scientifically correct in the sense that people didn't have to respond to where they lived. We didn't make that a requirement, and then also people entered their zip codes, not exactly where they lived. And as we know, the zip coded areas you can see here, we've broken it down by Logan area, Paradise area. Breaks it down to encompass those cities in particular. So, like I said, recognizing that this graphic has caused some maybe confusion of, seeing that Logan area being such a large percentage, trying to define that a little bit further as to the purpose of that graphic and where the statistics came from there.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. I was like, whoa, where's Hyde Park and North Logan? And
Yeah.
to see that all lumped into Logan, like, okay, but still shocked that Paradise even had 6%. Like, that seems pretty substantial for the whole valley. I don't think.
Yeah. And if there's, obviously, like I said, open to feedback on graphically if you think this could be represented differently, knowing that it's based on those zip codes. Obviously happy to hear feedback.
I think you've explained it well. It was
Okay.
just, when I first saw it, I'm trying to find
Yeah.
my city and like, where is it? And then I
Right.
get to the bottom and like,
Gotcha. Yeah, and this is something that I had our consultants, because like I said, there was some confusion there, and I said, can we further define what this means, what the graphic means, and kind of go into detail there. So then chapter 3 goes into the countywide goals and policies. We've got a definition of what goals and policies are, which honestly I think is, we think we understand what goals and policies mean, but I think that this is really helpful to have the definition in there of what the intent of these goals and policies are.
I had a question on this section.
Uh-huh.
I think it's on page 15, goal 1A.
Uh-huh.
It talks about wildlife corridors.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know we had wildlife corridors.
Yeah, so this would be in particular, so if we read that whole statement, apply appropriate land use zoning to limit residential development in sensitive land areas such as floodplains, riparian corridors, groundwater recharge areas, wildlife corridors, wildlife risk areas, and other environmentally sensitive features. So I would define those wildlife corridors as probably something that's going to be, I don't know if we necessarily have those mapped, but those are going to be those critical areas that allow wildlife to move from, point A to point B throughout the valley, and leaving those areas open so that you have, still have a migration corridor, basically. In terms of, and this is something that Chris, I don't know if you know this better than I do in terms of what those critical areas are, but that describes areas where wildlife can move fluently throughout our valley and not get hung up.
So specifically, the Division of Wildlife Resources maps and tries to understand where wildlife corridors are. And so that's a state agency that's focused on fish and wildlife conservation. And an easy way to think of a wildlife corridor would be, for example, for large mammals, deer, elk, moose, those kinds of mammals. They may have winter range in a certain part of the valley and a summer or fawning range in a different part of the valley.
My backyard.
And so they move, exactly. They move back and forth between those two important or critical habitats and create a migration corridor between those two. So that's an example of a
And they are kind
migration
of
corridor.
mapped.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the governor sent out a video a few months ago in his weekly newsletter that where they built one of those across.
A wildlife crossing,
Yeah, like above the road up I-80 that goes up
Yes.
Parley's Canyon.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
walk
that's a
those
wildlife
animals.
Well,
crossing.
yeah, it's pretty cool to see those videos, and once they learn how to use that area for travel, yeah.
So another local example would be up in Sardine Canyon. There's several underpasses underneath the
really?
highway that you don't see
Yeah,
unless
I
you
didn't
know
know they
that they're
existed.
there. And so allowing mostly deer to be able to get from one side of the highway to the other. So we still see quite a few losses each year along the
Yeah,
highway,
yeah.
but they are cited you know, in places where they know there's a wildlife corridor, because you don't want to put those kinds of structures just anywhere, so you want to understand where those wildlife corridors are to sort of facilitate that, and it's a safety issue along
Right,
highways,
right.
and really important in locating and designing those things like overpasses and underpasses, so that's some of what I know about them.
No, that was
The other
great.
question I have is on the goal 2, where it says protect our watersheds, air, soil, and water. And most of the ABCDE talks about water, which I know that affects soil too. There just was no detail on air.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me see, believe,
And maybe it's down on like transportation.
yeah, that's where I was thinking that we had addressed that, but that's a good point in terms of where, if we
you
don't
do,
have,
then just maybe have one of those ABCDEs here that talks about transportation and how that addresses
right,
air.
air quality, yeah. Sorry, I'm just going through here real quick to see. Yeah, I mean, technically, you know, reducing congestion on roadways. I think a lot of these that we identify under transportation probably assist in air quality measures, right? And so, but yeah, I think that's a good point in having something that, if we don't have anything in there that talks about air quality, that's probably important to include within there as well. Sorry, I'm going to make notes to myself. And again, these goals and objectives is what we took to the public and survey format, where we had over 1,000 responses and what people identified as important to them. Down to active lifestyles and recreation. Economic vitality, regional collaboration and land use planning, and of course a lot of this and how we collaborate with other entities and other municipalities within the valley is really emphasized in that regional collaboration plan. So this is kind of a light, as I think we touch on that there, yeah, that a lot of this will be discussed further in that regional collaboration plan. Valley connectivity, specifically talking about transportation.
Can you tell me what visitability is?
Yeah, that is
It was on page 18,
18.
under goal 3A. I just hadn't seen that word before.
Yeah, so consider implementing universal design standards and visitability standards. Honestly, I would say that would be something for me personally. I understand, you know, universal design standards for housing options. That's something that, you know, makes sense in terms of having a standard that across the county, but in terms of visitability standards, that's not something to me that really, I don't know if I even understand that land use term, and so I don't know if it necessarily.
Is it a matter of providing for visitors? Like sometimes parking is an issue, you know, even for the people that live there, and that if anybody comes to visit, there's really no place for parking. I don't know.
I mean,
Do you know what it is?
No, but
And
I
that-
think that's a good interpretation. Accessibility seems to be a component of that.
Yeah,
you know.
and I only say that just because if we don't understand it, then adopting something that doesn't make sense and who will understand that later probably isn't the best use of that term in there. So can we come up with something, not saying it doesn't belong there, but can we come up with something that makes sense?
Or define it.
Or define
Yeah,
it.
right, and for
Yeah.
us, like connectivity, you know, when you're trying to find an address and you get a dead end, and that road continues, you know, on the other side of the canal or on the other side of something, but you can't get to it from where you are, or you're at 300 South in one community, and you're looking for 300 South in the next community. You know, that's rough on visitors sometimes.
Yep.
Good point.
There is actually a definition in Wikipedia for whatever that's forever that's what yeah. It says
only I had
visitability
the-
is the design approach for new housing such that anyone who uses a wheelchair or other mobility device should be able to visit. A social visit requires the ability to get in the house, excuse me, to pass through interior doorways, and enter a bathroom to use
So
use the
ADA.
toilet.
ADA standards, which was not what I would have assumed.
Right, right.
So, I mean, that's something great. Like I said, can we define, maybe in the definitions, have that in there, just add it? Because I just looked through the glossary of terms and I don't see it in there either.
I think
And
that would be
so-
an easy way to do it.
Okay. Thanks for pointing that out.
That's,
I've looked, I've,
I don't think that ever came up in the steering committee. I don't
No.
know if that's
yeah.
if that's just a,
The
Yeah.
if
ADA.
that's the intention that we had. I mean, I'm all for accessibility, but that's
Were you
a,
two both on the steering committee? Sorry, I should have memorized that list.
but that's a, I mean, that's a federal standard that's there. I mean, if that's a value we want to put in there, but I don't remember that as being part of the discussion. I just wonder if that's the correct word that we should use.
For me, I learned a new term today.
yeah,
I
I,
use it 3 times.
yeah, I feel bad. It's one of those things that gets put in there that I've read it so many times and looked over it. I was just like, oh, yeah, until you pointed it out. I was like, oh, yeah, that, I'm not quite sure. I know what that means. So, solution there, adding to glossary the terms at the end would probably be the best solution for that. Okay.
Either that or having
Further.
a more understood,
Term. That's
accepted term.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Parking for people that come visit me.
Yeah. how do we fit that in there?
I don't live in the county.
Yeah.
so you're fine.
You can put that in the Hyde Park general plan. Great. Thanks for pointing that out, Melinda. Regional, we just went over that section. So valley connectivity. All right, so then we get to chapter 4. If there's nothing else there that we need to discuss, I'll keep moving forward here. So once again, this future land use plan addresses that the keep the city and the country, which has been a term that we've heard a lot, and that we've kept as a theme throughout the general plan. And so the future land use categories here, so like I said, these are going to provide an understanding and consider future development patterns within the county. I foresee these as helping steer where we have potential for future zones in the county. If we do, if we adopt the general plan and decide that the next step is going to be updating our ordinances, utilizing these land use categories will really help, I think, to guide where we make those land use decisions throughout the county. So, and this gives, I think, to the future land use map, I've used it since it hasn't been adopted, but I've had people call and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this property. What's the future land use type here? What could the zones look like in the future? So this is a tool that can be utilized by staff and those making the decisions on what the predictable development or appropriate development would look like in those areas.
I had a question on the mountain rural and conservation. So on secondary land uses, it talks about seasonal residential housing at 1 unit per 40 acres, clustered subdivision developments, resorts, recreation, business, and public institutions. How do you cluster when it's one home on 40 acres?
I think those were separate, weren't they?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, my initial thought was, generally it's going to be a piece of land that involves, a very, very large land area that's zoned FR 40 acre parcels. And if it's 4,000 acres, you've got 100 units, and you can cluster those, within that.
But I think
4,000
this was just a list. I wasn't following exactly
Yeah,
where you
sorry,
were
mountain
at. but-
rural on the secondary uses,
Page
page
24.
24.
So,
And maybe it's, you know, like in Hyde Park, we're trying to do like a higher mountain road that runs north-south, and we hope for just little short legs off that do service like little clusters, even though the area around them will be natural landscape and more open. But we don't want to be maintaining tons of roads to get up to these, or long driveways to individual things.
right,
We really
right,
just want to do that main road.
right, right.
So maybe that's kind of what this is. If you are going to be somewhere nearby, have the units down near whatever road the county does have.
I think these were separate, you know, there was this seasonal residential housing, so that's the FR 40 that we have in place, that, you know, you can use that up to 6 months. And in addition to that, as secondary clustered subdivision developments.
Separate thing.
That's,
Yeah.
so the preferred land use would be agriculture.
Right.
But if we're going to do subdivision developments, we cluster those in the corner of the property and maintain
By the access.
the ag
Right.
land.
Yeah, yeah. Jason, I think you interpret that correctly, and that, you know, we're looking at a land use that's within our, you know, mountainous areas, so you want to be protecting probably, so clustering would be the preferred development pattern in those areas.
Yeah, in the most efficient way
Right,
to develop.
yep.
Well, for instance, how is Ann Platts Road categorized or zoned? We have all those cabins up there.
That's all FR 40.
So
Yeah.
that'd be the same thing, right?
Yep,
Yeah, but a lot of those older subdivisions are just 40-acre lots everywhere. And so hopefully, if the same scenario came to us today after we adopt this plan, you know, that might look a little bit different, right?
great. Yep. Agriculture and ranching.
On each of those, I kind of like on that graph before where you said it was kind of confusing, you know, that Logan, it seemed like Logan had a higher participation. Anyway, on these, some of these I had a tough time reading until I get to the bottom where it says example areas, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So I just wondered about putting that section, example areas, up between location and purpose and character.
Okay. Having that more in the
Consider it,
forefront
because when I saw the example areas, then the descriptions made more sense.
made more
to
sense
me.
to you. Okay. I think that's good feedback. Rural communities, industrial and mineral extraction, retail, commercial, urban expansion overlay. And so that urban expansion overlay area is specifically looking at areas that are within the unincorporated county, but are in the future annexation areas of the municipality. So kind of that area where I think we struggle a lot with, you know, the city has a vision for what that looks like. It's in the county. And so this urban expansion overlay land use type really tried to identify those areas and how moving forward we would make land use decisions there. So I, for one, think those are some of the trickiest areas in the county for sure. So just wanted to point out specifically that that was the goal of this urban expansion overlay.
Could I jump back just the rural community? I
Yep.
think this is one of the major changes that may give us a tool, you know, if the code follows what we're doing in the rural area, in the unincorporated areas, because we have, you know, Avon, Cove, Benson. Oh, there's a typo there. It's College Ward.
Yep, that was one of the ones that I caught too. So
And it's Cache Junction.
yep, that was the other one that I caught too.
But
Thanks.
you know, I think
And
this.
then let me just say that Young Ward is not
Young
College
Ward is
Ward.
not- yes.
We like to be
Listed.
understood separately. So you
is
might
true.
want to
Are
list
you another
Young
example
Ward.
of the same thing?
So,
Does
so
Young
we
Ward belong
have,
Yes.
we have areas that are not purely dispersed, you know, really rural. There are clusters of homes. You go to Benson, you go to Avon.
Absolutely.
You have clusters of homes and.
Beautiful
and so I-
downtown Benson.
Exactly. And so I think the intention of this is to give us some tools to deal with those types of areas where it makes more sense that we can put another house here, we can increase density because it's already a community area, and so increasing density, or a business, you know, beautiful down, you know, Daryl's Appliances there, so does it make sense that a convenience store goes next to that because it's already a commercial area or something like that?
And honestly, if it follows, you know, Salt Lake or other valleys, those communities end up being cities 20 years down the road, or however many years down the road.
And so our councils help in guiding that, and the codes help in guiding that to become a more planned, reasonable community, not just development, subdivisions, things like that.
Here and there, kind of.
I think the intention of this is to give us some tools to help with that.
Yeah, I did
Going
like
along with
that
the
one.
rural, it's the discouraged uses. It seems like a lot of our heavy industrial are in those rural areas. I mean, you look throughout the county though, we're saying it's discouraged, but some of our biggest, you know,
Yeah,
I'm looking at Pepperidge Farm, Casper's Ice Cream, you know.
Wrightwood,
they're-
Lauer. I have that same question because we had that come before us, right?
and some of our, you know, I was thinking Cash Junction is one of our only zones where we have, is it industrial, it's industrial. Because we needed to have one of those somewhere in the county, and I think that predates me. It probably predates you.
Right.
But that was how it was explained to me, is we had an industrial zone
And we,
in Cash Junction.
Is that where his storage sheds are? Nate's?
No. That's more Petersboro. But it was to provide, you know, a location for those, so we had a zone where you could do those types of uses. So I think that's a good point, that maybe that discouraged use is not.
I don't think it should be a discouraged use, in my opinion, just because that's where they kind of fit within the county. I mean, they're on the
They
outskirts.
can.
So,
I think, you know, some of those examples you gave are immediately on a highway. And,
Yeah.
some of our larger industrial complexes sit or are nestled between Nibley and Hiram, for example. I mean, there's a growing industrial area in that part
Even,
of the county.
I can't remember the name of the company, the automated, the
ASI?
autonomous, ASI.
Right.
Out in,
They're a good example of somebody that wants to be away from, an industry that wants to be away from other uses, so
And it's
that they're
made
not
reasonably
a
good
nuisance.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my question, like, when we had Wrightwood Eggs here, because, you know, someone wanted to make it a little denser there, and Wrightwood is saying, okay, we're gonna get squeezed out, and pretty soon the people that live here are gonna say it stinks, and we don't like it, and why do we have these smelly businesses here that were there first? Like, tell me how this guides those decisions.
or ag meetings, my trucking company where we have 75 trucks, it makes more sense to be out a little bit away from everybody, where we're not disturbing the masses, and with trucks running and everything else, it makes more sense for me to build out in the county. I don't know if that would be considered, you know, it is industrial, I mean.
Yeah.
Build a
That's
yard.
I mean, it's a good point, I think.
There's,
that-
how do we
that maybe
accommodate
could
that?
be
If we're discouraging it
revisited.
here, how do we accommodate that kind of development and that kind of growth? Just a point.
and maybe we need to zoom out just a little bit, because we do have the other areas, I mean, industrial mineral extraction. But in agriculture and ranching, we say heavy industrial, but we didn't put everything into there, so.
Part of what the council is looking at is there's two areas in the county now. We're looking at CRAs, trying to create an industrialized or commercial area. One of them is out where the old soda manufacturing plant is. They're in the North Logan area, and then another one's down in Nibley.
On the corner of the airport, of like going down
Well,
Airport Road?
It will be broad. It will go on both sides of the highway. Looking at creating a CRA there, and also
What's
the
CRA?
Commercial Redevelopment Agency, something that encourages tax incentives to build your business in this area. Duluth will be one of them, and in those areas. We've got that, where Logan Manufacturing, and we've anticipated other businesses have approached us and come to there, so that's two of the things we're working on right now, that it won't solve what you're talking about, Brandon, as far as trucking and agricultural side, but it will incentivize them from a tax standpoint to go into those areas.
And that's my whole point, yeah.
And, yeah, and I think it's very important that the planning commission and council, you know, takes a look at this land use map and the uses that are recommended, because obviously, you know, those uses that are there and quote unquote have been grandfathered in, right, are gonna remain there, but going forward, making those decisions that you make as a planning commission when projects come forward to you, where are those uses most appropriate, identified by this future land use map, you know, what makes sense. This really helps, you know, to guide some of those decisions. So if something doesn't make sense here and it's not the appropriate area for that use, then we should definitely, you know, identify that for sure.
I did like the part on, oh, I guess we're not there yet. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're all good. So, and I'm curious just on feedback too with this future land use map, knowing that this plan included the entire county, so that's what the map shows. I've heard some feedback on, you know, it's kind of hard to see specific areas since it's such a large map. I don't know.
And most of the information you want to focus on is really just the western half.
Right, so
Third.
want feedback on having also, like this map, right, because we should include the entire county because that's what this plan addresses, but a map that's zoomed in more, yeah, of that.
Yeah, that would be smart,
Okay,
because the action is in the valley.
yep. Great. So if we don't, I mean, if we want to, I'm happy to talk through this more if you guys look at that and have more feedback, or if something doesn't make sense, please let me know and we can definitely address it. So jumping to Chapter 5, Implementation and Plan Management. So specifically, this is going into implementation strategies. So once the general plan is wrapped up, where do we move to next with actually utilizing this general plan? Something that, and we want these implementation strategies to make sense so that the plan is utilized instead of, you know, we don't adopt it and it doesn't just sit on a shelf, right? And so it goes through regulatory tools. And this is where we've incorporated some of Tim's graphics that he helped to make sense of those.
I was excited to see fiber and broadband and telecommunications in there.
Oh, awesome. Great. Yeah, and these were, where's the fiber? Is that on page 30? Okay, great. And so we've incorporated some of Tim's image in there to help make a visual picture of those recommendations as well. Partners in coordination, utilizing other programs.
Special Services District.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that again. I'm sure I should know what that is.
Yeah.
You described it a little later. That might be one that I had a question on and then later read more about it.
Okay. And that's on page...
Well, it first mentions it on 33, the fourth bullet point. Consider the creation of special service districts or local districts for expanded infrastructure and services in annexation policy areas.
So that would be something, and I don't know, Tim, is this going to be something that's touched on more? I think because we have a note on there about expanding those special services districts within the...
Water district.
Oh, okay, that's right.
So you could
That's
create
right.
Yep.
Like it's not a city-owned
a
one.
water district, a sewer district.
Yep.
That's
Or
right.
something like that to
That's
expand
right.
services to an area, so if you, if we said, well, the west side of the valley has water issues, they might be better served to have a special service
Combine.
district out there to provide quality water.
But doesn't mean they need to incorporate as a city to get that
Correct.
service.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, and that will be touched on more in that cost of services and urban and rural area assessment as well.
On page 34, and maybe, I don't know if it's in the next section or not, let's see. Last bullet point of right before plan management. Develop a marketing and branding campaign to promote Cache Valley. People already know about it, and they like it, and they're coming. We cannot house them.
You ever move that?
I know, like, that's what I mean, you guys that have lived here for 50 years, like, you don't want that part in there.
And
I
even,
mean-
even beyond that, I mean, we already have that. I mean, that's really part of, that these folks do
Right,
on the other side
right.
of the other side of the hallway here.
And maybe you just want them to come up for the day or the night, not move here.
Yeah, tourism.
Or just send their money.
Venmo?
Do we, removing that?
No,
What? Oh,
no. I'm just laughing because
Oh.
we're not housing people very well right now, but I don't think that's a county issue. I think
Okay.
that's individual city issues.
It does
Okay.
actually seem out of place for a general plan. Maybe that's just me, but for a general,
You want to say
zoning
promote
plan.
Cache Valley tourism?
something that's a little bit different worded. I think we did go a little bit back and forth on that recommendation there and saying that it did feel out of place and how is it worded? You know, it may not make sense to everyone.
Right above plan management.
Oh, it's under the implementation strategies.
To the extent that it relates to some of the economic development recommendations. So, I think speaks in support of some of those.
Yeah.
missed
I
it.
think the point is, right, we're not excited about promoting it as a place for everybody to come and live
live here.
necessarily, yeah. So if it's interpreted that
So
way.
you might
I'll
want
bet
to
Sean
add
Milne had
tourism.
that added.
Then you might want to call it tourism. Because I
Right.
took it as move here. Because I did move here.
Okay.
And I guess you could look at it from other angles, you know, the economic development as far as businesses attracting
Right.
businesses to.
Right, which we
develop
do
those
try to
out
do,
here
you know,
as
we try to
well.
get those businesses, like, I think it's talked about later, that pay that have the higher wages. But you've got to house them.
The
we
perception,
cities need
I
to
think
house them.
maybe we share is that it's not a lack of people moving here that's a challenge for the valley, for businesses or whatever. It's finding housing for people more than anything.
Right. Well, I do know if the public did not read the entire plan and they just read that bullet point, maybe they'd all come out in droves next week to be against
If
the
you want
plan.
them here, those are the things you advertise.
That's good feedback. So, and then last section is just plan management. So, looking at this as a living document, knowing that it grows and changes over time, outlines the review and update process, and also the process for amending the general plan. And then that last section will be those appendices along with the glossary of terms. Great, so a lot of content there. Just gonna pause for a second, and if anyone has any questions just about overall format of the plan, feedback, questions, we can take a moment to talk about them, if there's anything. Or if something comes up later.
I just wonder on page 31, I mean, our last planning zoning thing was very indicative of this. We talked about the RU2 and the RU5
Yeah.
and clustering, but when Wellsville City came out and strongly said that was not part of their growth plan, put an RU2 right next to there, I think we ought to have something about adapting or listening to what the city's expansion is, because that had a big part of what we were doing on that RU2. Even though it was next to the municipality, once the municipality said that's not what they want, is 2-acre lots in their city, and that gave us a high definition as to why we didn't accept that. So I would like to see something about cities have input onto that as well as to
I
what
think
their growth is.
The
Does
fact that we have a
make sense?
whole collaboration
So,
document as
yeah.
well.
Yes.
I think
We addressed that
Have
back
that.
there.
Is it in here somewhere? Because I was looking here in the TDRs and the RU5s and the RU2s, because we
I feel
specifically
like it
said
was.
the RU2s are next to municipalities.
Go back.
But here's a good example, that RU2 was right against Wellsville City, but Wellsville City's like, that isn't our growth strategy.
Right.
Under relationship with cities, is it in there on page 22?
and the definition of the regional collaboration plan on the last page.
Yeah.
I think that's a good example of one scenario, and I think we've also seen examples of the opposite, where a community says, hey, we don't care, it's right up against our boundary, and, yeah, exactly.
Bring it.
And,
And,
yeah,
and so you see.
let it happen, right.
We ended up.
We're not opposed to it.
Smithfield doesn't give us any input, but here's Wellsville saying this isn't the strategy.
Yeah.
So we weighted good to what the Wellsville City or the city is saying to us.
Yeah,
I mean, you go to Paradise and all of their lots are basically 1 acre, so Paradise, that might adapt very well to what they're looking at.
right.
But I just mention it, that it might be something that is, if we're talking our general plan, we give clear listening to what the city's growth expansion is and how they want to see that go.
And not acknowledging that that's important to us in our decision-making, especially within an annexation areas.
I guess I feel like that's pretty clear in
I
the
wonder,
collaboration.
I appreciate this discussion right now. It's a good setup for regional collaboration, and then further drills down into urban and rural area assessment and cost of services. It sets the table for very specific conversations with cities.
So let's talk about that cost of services. When that person came here wanting to do that, very much seemed to me, his opinion was the city pays for the sewer to come across the road, why should he? So we should be telling any developer who's coming in, are you aware that this is a burden upon you, the landowner, or the developer, and not the municipality? Because we heard it twice that, hey, the city should be paying for the sewer, doing something that in your analysis of cost of services.
Yes, and then the scale of the development proposed is just not cost feasible to bring those services over. And so could there be enough property owners to work together to bring those services and develop under Wellsville's standards? Or will we see another attempt with the developer, landowner going between city and county repeatedly until there could be more discussion to be had on some of those specific areas. But that's one of many examples of the current growth pressures and issues that we face on a daily basis at the county. And so I've been trying to capture the permitting in the current planning world and Angie's world of, making sure subdivisions follow the right standards and then rezone, have careful analysis. There's a lot of discussion to continue to have with our city partners.
Well, I mean, when somebody comes to the council and says, I want to develop this, this is my retirement fund, we're like, no, it's not. The county is not here to make sure you make a profit. We're like, this just turns me off all of a sudden.
Right, right,
And the same with the developer saying, well, I can't afford it, well then, that's it.
right.
Don't come and say the city ought to pay for it. So, in the cost of services, I'm just hoping we are very front with that and letting them know. Because obviously the last 2 or 3 that we've listened to, we're like, really?
Right, and I think it's, the first step is having these tools in place, and as you'll see presented with the cost of services, actually having that data and analysis done so that the council has, when you have people who come to you with these, concerns and, that the council has, hey, look at this analysis that we've done, and this is what it shows. So I think that this is a good first step in addressing some of those concerns.
Well, I mean, this individual had been to the city, and the city says, well, you gotta pay for it, and then he comes to the county saying, well, the city won't pay for it, so help me on this, and I'm like, hey, you should have listened the first time. Or somebody didn't put that into your brain far enough.
You know, and in that example though, like, if I were in his shoes, the simple, approach would be, okay, well, now I'm gonna come in with a much higher density development to justify, you know, the investment that it's gonna take.
But then we still listen
do
to the
that.
city, because then if he goes to much higher density, then he's gotta be in the city.
Correct, exactly, what I was saying, yeah, it's sort of forcing him to
Right,
meet the requirements
which I
of the
think is the
city.
right thing, if he wants
Yes.
that higher density, he
Yes.
meets the city's wants and growth patterns, so that it makes us together and everything.
I think it's the right thing.
Yeah, and they want, you know, they understand, they know the benefits of living, of that property where it is and, you know, access to the road or the highway or whatever it might be. And so it is more expensive because that's a wider road and that's, you know, maybe they even have a corner. And so they do have a huge advantage to that piece of property, but they don't want to pay the extra cost of that huge advantage.
And so, you know, and then they say, okay, I want the city to pay for it, and this is my retirement fund, and I'm like,
I think, you know, it's another example of, you know, when we have folks who come into the county and they're not sophisticated developers, right? I mean, a developer who knows what they're doing is going to run a pro forma and figure out what the density options are, how much are my costs gonna be to bring that infrastructure in, that sort of thing. And so unfortunately, I don't think the landowners were being served well by someone that didn't have a lot of experience in working through that.
well, and that's what we said to one in the council is, okay, caveat emptor, buyer beware. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't
absolutely.
take that burden off of you
Yeah.
if you purchase that and you expect to make a profit from it,
Yep.
Yeah,
so.
it's still hard to face them and say, no.
And when you get
It is hard to say no.
profit off of it, it's pretty easy for us to say not gonna.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll come around to, you know, the right decisions.
Well, as I look at all of this and, you know, we plan for these things, but as soon as somebody with money comes in, it's like they're on the water ski park that they're proposing right there on 10th, off of 10th West and along the river. If you're gonna preserve a beautiful part of Logan, or Cache Valley, you're gonna put a water ski park on an area that floods all the time anyway?
Yeah.
But Logan City accepted it, gave them a lot of heavy conditions. Logan City accepted that. And I'm thinking, holy mackerel, what are you people thinking? That you would come in and take that section of the valley and put a water ski park on there.
Yeah. Even the best tools don't guarantee the right decisions, right?
Yeah, but this guy's got money enough to come in and buy the ground and hire these engineers to come up with something that our water district guy says, I don't think there's any way they can make that work in there.
Yeah.
He's a developer, my next door neighbor now, obviously says he can do it. But, that's just nuts to me that, I don't know how many more are gonna be like that.
Well, we're facing it on the south end of the valley, past Avon, and there are some people up there
Yeah.
whose lips are licking to get roads and grounds up there so that they can, they envision a Park City there,
Yeah.
so.
Great. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully it doesn't look like Park City here soon, but we plan well, hopefully. So if we can move to the regional collaboration plan for now, and we can go back if we need to, if that's appropriate and everyone's okay with that. So, so the regional collaboration plan, that first sentence in the introduction states, the regional collaboration plan is meant to help with those coordinated land uses and transportation decisions through the communities. Knowing that each of the municipalities have their own general plan and annexation policies, and how do we effectively work with those at a countywide, regional level there. And so these, where you see these images, those are going to be placed with images in there in the draft. But these growth-related issues and topics are something that we put in here based on that fun survey that I had at the Joint Planning Commission and Council meeting, identifying that these were important land use planning and regulation decisions and what came to the forefront there. So that's where these topics come from. Moving into water, sewer.
For that,
Uh-huh.
on housing, number 8. The very end, for young adults and others that would like to stay in Cache Valley. Again, is it only for people who were born here, or is it for anyone that wants to live in Cache Valley?
And you read that as, I guess, are you interpreting, when you read that, you,
Yeah, I'm saying, it sounds like you only want people who were, like you're looking for ways for, like, our own children to stay here if they want.
Yes.
But I'm saying, what if someone from Ogden wants to move here?
But just a few minutes ago, you were saying how you don't want people moving here.
I'm from
but
Salt
that-
Lake, so I do love living here.
I suspect that was initially the intent, was to acknowledge that there's not enough opportunities for our own.
I think that comes from the fact that 80-some% of our growth comes from within.
Agreed.
So we're adapting or going to the majority of where our growth goes from. So we do have a housing committee looking at things and doing things, but you can't really solve that housing problem when the costs are where they are, so.
But to your point, though, I think you're saying it seems a little bit exclusive the way it reads.
Yes.
And should probably not be quite so exclusive, yeah.
That would be my request.
okay.
Because you're bringing in these major companies with higher wages and the educated workforce, but you're saying you can only draw from people who already live here.
I see your point. So.
Yeah. Point, yeah.
A quick question. So we have these additional plans, the regional collaboration plan, et cetera. As we give a recommendation to the council, will that be for those as well as the general plan?
Yes, it will be adopting all 4 packaged. So, yes, I imagine seeing, I mean, it might make it a little tricky, but it'll probably make sense at that time to adopt each in their own set instead of one. Trying to think through what will make most sense at the phase of adoption, but
It's kind of.
there's amendments to what you don't want to kind of group them all together. You might need to make separate motions for each of the plans, since they are.
We'll see how it goes, but I mean, my initial reaction is, I would be surprised if, our group would say, yep, all 4 at the same time, let's, but not to say that it couldn't happen.
Consent items?
It just seems that, I mean, those plans probably need a little more development
Yeah,
in
yeah.
what limited.
They're not quite as
Pro-
ready
we-
as the
We'll
general
probably
plan.
need more time to dig into those,
Right.
right?
And, right.
Since we haven't seen them all. at this
Yeah,
point.
and if it makes sense and the planning commission is not comfortable adopting all of those, right? If you don't feel the governing body doesn't feel that they're at a good place, then if we wanted to just adopt the general plan, like I said, that's the one thing that really needs to, that we need, and then if we need to adopt the rest later, that's fine
And is it
too.
okay to adopt the general plan, even though it refers to other plans that are still in the draft stages?
Yeah, I think you could adopt the general plan knowing that the other, stating that the other plans are in draft
I think it gives us
form.
a pathway forward.
Lauren,
It's a step.
Might help if you were to list, so that when they get to the regional collaboration, there is already a pretty broad regional collaboration and committee going on, so that you may list those that are going on. I mean, you got the Cache Mayors Association, you got the Planning Association, you've got all of those that are doing as far as seeing what's going on, if that helps in the regional collaboration.
Right, and we have, so under the section, under the regional collaboration plan, on page, and that's attached to your guys' packet there that have paper copies, by the way. It's just tucked behind the general plan.
Mayor's Association, the same as COG, or is that different?
So on page 9, we have the land use planning and regulation. So this addresses both the formal and informal organizations that provide land use and planning coordination to support the county and incorporated areas. So there we have listed the Bear River Association of Government, the CMPO, and the Cache County Council of Governments, so the COG. So if we feel like there's more, that should be included within that, and also addressing more informal partners. And we also have UDOT as well, so. The city managers and county executive also meet on a monthly basis. So we do have that outlined. We've got the mayor's forum in there as well. So if we feel like there's more that needs to be added to that section, we can definitely include that in there. But back to kind of just adoption phase. Like I said, if the planning commission's not comfortable and ready to make a motion by next Thursday, which understandable with where some of these supplemental documents are at, I do believe we could still move forward the general plan and just make it clear within that motion that the other documents will subsequently be adopted as well.
Echo that and the regional collaboration plan, we feel are in a good advanced state. The urban rural assessment cost of services plan, getting more specifics about how to explore implementation of those and have more detailed conversations looking at cost comparisons. So they're completely supportive of the two documents that we feel are most ready for review.
And I think it's quite possible the council, as these documents come up, they may say, well, we will wait till the planning commission sends all 4 up to us before we take action on them. I could see that as a potential scenario.
Right.
But there could be merit or value in council then workshopping and beginning to hear.
Absolutely.
Potentially adopted plans is then the next
Yeah.
large bite of a review.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think, right, my thinking is it's going to be challenging for our commissioners to, take all 4 of these documents, digest them, and then be prepared to take action on them all at the same time. I mean,
Right.
it does make sense that we will probably,
Right.
not to say that it couldn't be different, but we will probably take them one at a time and move them along, and it could go another way, but that's maybe
Okay.
a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
would be.
Well, and that's helpful feedback, because as I was thinking through this and how do I bring this forward with, that's a lot, right? A lot of documents, and I wanted to have kind of at least everything put together in the sense so those other documents, the supplemental documents, made sense as a support to the general plan, and you weren't just getting one separate piece at a time, but at least be able to present in a draft what the rest will look like, so you understand,
In a way, it would maybe even, I'm not suggesting this, but at least the way my mind works, I would want to see those other documents first, and then the general plan last, right? So, for whatever it's worth.
I'm ready to share the other documents in draft form.
Okay.
They were not in your packet, but to provide an overview of them.
Right. And so I'll just quit. So just regional collaboration plan. I think you all understand the intent behind the goals of that. the importance of this document. I really foresee too that this document will help to steer and guide my program with countywide planning and projects that I take and work with at a regional level as well. So this will be really invaluable, I think, to my program as well, and giving my program a direction in those projects too. So broken down by land use planning and regulation, water, sewer, roadways, fire emergency management services, law enforcement. And then when we get down to this analysis and policy alternatives, this is going to give the recommendations for how to address, recommendations and implementation. That's what I meant to get to. These are kind of the goals for the regional collaboration element of the general plan. So this is where the kind of guiding comes in for how to move forward with the regional collaboration plan. So
back up just a little bit on the goals there. So Nolan, I think this kind of gives you collaborate with local communities to guide new growth and development toward urban areas and available resources and minimize suburban and urban growth in the unincorporated. So it's kind of the collaboration part of it that you were talking about.
I hope we emphasize that.
right. And
Because anytime and this gets to the cost of services, but anytime we cluster develop or whatever else, we have to watch response time for emergency management systems and everything else, and it's a big cost and burden on the county side too. So if we get the cities helping us on that and working on their annexation, that makes it a lot easier for you guys in planning and zoning, and a lot easier for the cities to accept what's coming around them, because they've each mapped out their footprint, so they should be able to grow the way they want to. Within reason, especially if it's in their annexation plan.
right. Great. So just so to be cognizant of time, I will turn over some time to Tim to talk about the cost of services in urban and rural area assessment, if we're ready for that.
Yeah, and I think, as I understand sort of the purpose of our meeting tonight, it's to kind of get an overview of these documents and how they relate to each other, what kind of content is in them. Obviously, where we've been able to dig into them a little bit, we have some specific suggestions at this point, but it's really just an overview of the documents to prepare us for our first hearing on them next week.
Right. And if, it will be up to the planning commission on about, if you're not ready to pass them on to the council, then we'll just move forward from there, right? No,
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Right.
As you know, but.
Okay. I'm going to give you several different perspectives of what's being prepared, including a look under the hood for a minute, anyway. And my hope is to describe to you how this can be a valuable tool for discussion about growth, recognizing that the county in no way dictates the decisions that the cities make, but I do believe that the cities and municipalities look to countywide planning, and definitely the current planning efforts in the county to at least collaborate, but also to work through challenges, to work through challenging conversations about housing, and looking at model ordinances for water-wise landscaping, for moderate income and affordable housing options. And those are challenging conversations that communities are having right now. When Lauren and our team have gone out and talked to communities, they're looking for support to have these challenging conversations. So the wheel that Lauren showed with 4 different plans is actually turning into what you see titled here is a Cache Countywide Urban and Rural Area Assessment. This is not a plan per se, but it's an evaluation, a study. And then the cost of services is a comparison of 3 alternative development patterns as part of that assessment. So the cost of services is actually a pretty robust model that our consultant team and I've been working on together. And you see that there's an effort to look at the potential growth of county as well as each municipality, looking at certain land development assumptions, and then getting into a projection. And I'm not going to take the time to talk through this model in great detail, but just to help illustrate that every community is looked at for its potential growth, its potential future employees, residential population, group housing population, school population. We've reached out and spoken with both school districts and had some productive conversation there about potential future impacts there. And then to explore scenarios about, are we talking in the future about very low density residential, low, moderate, or high densities, and where and how much? And then to the extent that these development patterns may or may not preserve land simultaneously through cluster development, through transferable development rights, and then employment projections. And this model then produces the potential fiscal and economic tax revenues associated with property taxes, as well as the stimulus in a community for spending and generating sales tax revenues, both at the brick and mortars as well as the clicks online and collecting retail sales tax at the point of sale at a residence even. So really this is a combination of a urban rural area assessment, and that assessment occurs through a cost of services comparison through the cost of services model, looking at 3 alternative development patterns. And this really sets the stage to talk about how this beautiful valley that we love, and as Nolan mentioned, 85% of our growth has been internal. And so how do we collectively anticipate growing to 137,000 by the year from 137,000 to 186,000 by 2040, with 22,000 new households and 26,000 new employees. And we certainly don't want to send a message to the communities that, well, you better take this many and your percentage of the share of the population and households is this many. But I think that's where the value of scenarios come in, is it's to say, what if? What if we grew this way? And what would the infrastructure burden be in terms of the cost that homeowners pay up front? And how does that affect their housing costs? How much water is used, depending on the lot size and the type of housing and the overall footprint and size of growth? And then what are the fiscal and economic revenues and impacts, positive or negative, compared to the cost of those services? So that's kind of the stage for how this discussion works. And it acknowledges here that we're focused on the primary areas of growth, the valley where the services are, and less about the mountain areas, understanding there could be some more resort type or recreation type of development in the mountain areas. This section, kind of in the introduction, states that in high growth areas we see cities expand and become larger, and then that reduces the county unincorporated area, and that can greatly change the feel and look of an area, and that the definition of urban and rural can vary from community to community. And so these scenarios will help have these conversations, which may vary quite differently from some of the west side smaller communities compared to the growth that we see merging together between Nibley, Millville, Providence, and Logan, and what happens along the Blacksmith Fork River there, and balancing land conservation, trails, and land uses there. Some of the key questions that are set up here are: how are current services impacted? What new services can be incorporated? What environmental impacts does growth cause? How might open space and trail corridors be preserved as land develops? Are current development trends sustainable moving forward? What housing needs are being met? How or what should develop to improve economic development? And how to fund improvements to promote growth? I've been very interested listening to some of your discussion as we really been building up to this through the regional collaboration plan and other general plan recommendations. And what this section is that I'm about to share is, first of all, just a description that there are 3 growth scenarios, and the purpose of those is to explore and to look at trade-offs associated with different growth patterns. And it serves as a companion element to the general plan and the regional collaboration plan, and is intended to support regional land use collaboration and provide communities with a comprehensive perspective when making land use decisions.
That's kind of important, right, Tim? Like, it's a companion document. It's not necessarily that the general plan relies on this information or vice versa, right?
That's right.
It's more of a companion. It's not as though
Reference.
it has to be, connected. I'm thinking of the adoption process, right? And
Yep.
and how one relies on the other. It's sort of a side document that goes off. Not saying this in a negative way, but kind of goes off on a tangent to explore different options, that sort of thing.
Yep, and the future land use map that Lauren shared shows a lot of green throughout the county as kind of a base low-density residential, but then acknowledging that there are substantial areas anticipated for annexation for each community, some more realistic than others, right? And some with more capacity to service that growth than others. But could there be discussions about the county establishing sewer and water districts to help implement the growth that a community would want next to them, that maybe they don't have the service or the services or the capacity? And so how could we collaborate that way to grow in a manner that they would like to, maybe with new services?
So that's a good point, though. Like, I'm trying to just understand the connections between the documents, right?
Yep.
Is the future land use plan that's shown in the general plan one of these scenarios? Or is it a combination of them, or are they really kind of just different?
So, were you going to respond? Sorry.
I can answer that question, but if you want to jump in,
Oh,
feel free.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so you'll see, like, when we look at the draft of the general plan, that we were waiting for this document to be finalized, just making sure that those growth patterns and scenarios didn't compete with what that future land use, so they should support each other in what that future land use, and it's not totally contradicting of each other.
But it's
so.
not literally, oh, we took this scenario and that is our future land use map.
Correct.
Yep, that's right. And in fact, if I would describe the 3 scenarios with some graphics here in just a moment, but to mention that part of the struggle, but I think a good resolution in terms of how these documents work together, has been that it's hard to plan a future annexation area of a municipality. It is county unincorporated area. And on one hand, we could say, well, we're the county, we'll just wait and see what happens. But on the other hand, in the
Been doing for 100 years.
Oh, yeah. So, and what I think the general plan leans towards in terms of the strongest recommendations is to collaborate with those communities and really dig deep into exploring what if we transfer development right? What if we cluster, and what if we find the right growth patterns and the right balance between growth, development, and preservation, and we come up with new ordinances, and we're very intentional and strategic in how we work together and achieve the benefits and the quality of life that is desired.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention too, Chris, kind of to your point of thinking how all these documents work together. And Chris, Tim, and I have talked at length many a times on how these documents all fit together. What's the best way to have, are these documents appendices to the general? How do they work together? Yes. And I really do just view, the regional collaboration plan, urban and rural assessment, and cost of services as companion documents. Those are providing, you see a recommendation in the general plan, and you go, oh, I can go to the urban and rural area assessment and look at that specific growth. So they really just are additional supplemental, but not a requirement, I don't think, of
Well,
the.
that's helpful. I mean, if that's the way they really function together, then it is easier to see adopting them all together. And once we figure out how we like the general plan, work through that, it's sort of natural that these companion documents might come along with it and not have to be, decided on separately necessarily.
And maybe they should be appendices in the general plan. Is there would there be a reason why it'd be better to have those as standalone documents?
Right, I think they'll end up being appendices, and I say that because I think when you see, I mean, this language makes sense, but if someone was to pick up one of these documents and just try to read that, I think it would not make a whole lot of sense as a standalone. They need to be accompanying the general plan, and that's where we went a lot of back and forth on how they should fit together.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. A moderate income housing plan is sometimes a plan appendix, and sometimes it's a standalone element of a general plan. And yet, this urban rural area assessment takes great care not to over prescribe what cities should do. It's more just to say, here's 3 scenarios looking at a regional level, how we could grow, and here are benefits and drawbacks and potential achievements. So maybe that does lean more to an appendix in that sense.
So just on that, could you, who is this, what you just mentioned, who's that intended for? Is that for this body and the council, or is that intended for regional, for municipalities to throw that out to them, and how would that, we give them the 3 options, who's that intended for?
All of us. I appreciate that question. It's a great question. It's really to promote the working together and exploring how communities grow together, and what happens when Millville, Providence, Logan, and Nibley grow together. How nice could it be? How much public benefit and so forth could there be? Or is it kind of chaos and competition and collision, right? And then could Wellsville and Mendon explore different ways to expand outward? Do they want to remain on a kind of an acre grid, or do they want to explore something that really does create green belts and working agricultural lands that are kind of woven into their surroundings? So it's really a countywide tool. And then I think appreciate Angie being here and Oscar. Appreciate both of you here. But in terms of the ordinance drafting, could there be the right kind of clustering and transferring in the county that reduces the infrastructure length, so it does reduce the cost of service, the burden of the cost of those services, but at the same time does not disrupt the need for a countywide grid and connectivity and mobility. So those are all kind of principles and contextual land use planning ideas that are being documented in this assessment, so that the table is set with important and ready to discuss and chew on conversation pieces, but with no implication as you really should do this, or we expect you to do this, but we're ready to collaborate. I'll just share this. It's a little hard to read some of the detail on the screen, but what you see to the left are diagrams, and they're presently in this hand sketched form. And if I could just show in a zoomed in view, and these little solid gray areas, they represent existing communities that maybe haven't quite grown into each other yet, but they're kind of headed that way. And so you see the growth pattern on the left kind of implies that there could be some open space preservation through cluster development, and you see some a little more of these dead-end private roads. You see kind of a broader grid, but you see patches of open space, and you compare that to the growth scenario on the right, and this is more of a what would result from collaboration between cities and county working together, establishing receiving areas, intentional clustering, transferring of development rights, and frankly, having more diversity of development types and densities, such that there's less pressure on the outward on land areas because of more absorption per acre, right? And meeting the housing needs for those that make $50,000 to $100,000 per household. What can they afford? And so where and how that happens in this little sketch here, there's a lot to discuss there, but then you could have working agricultural lands out on the perimeter more, trailways connecting out along some of the riparian areas. So the nice thing about scenarios, it's what if we grew this way? What would be the total, now to go back to this kind of summary, what would be, so here's the population accommodated, the households, the developed acres. Notice between the baseline growth, which represents really the way we have been growing, more of a, just kind of it frankly kind of explores what if we keep going down an RU5, RU2 rezone path. And I'm not saying that's what we've done entirely as a county, but what if we did? And what if cities keep growing at third to quarter acre lots, subdivisions? That's more or less what's represented here. And you see the total developed acres, but then you see something in comparison that develops on less acreage, but starts to preserve more acres. And then the more urban area growth emphasis has even less developed gross acres, more open space preserved. Notice the correlation with the arterial collector road miles. You see a reduction in the infrastructure, both in terms of road miles as well as the utility miles and the costs associated with those. Here they're measured in this column as a utility cost per 1,000 individuals. There's reduced vehicle miles traveled. It's not, maybe not as substantial as some of the other figures, but nonetheless, the less miles there are to drive, then the total miles driven drops. And then note the water use reduction, that just by virtue of the size of the average size of the lots that are being developed, you just have less irrigation.
Oh, I put that on our, as a note on our utility bill a month or two ago, and I had one resident that was just angry and like, I'd like to see you prove this.
Oh.
You know, that putting 4 houses per acre uses less water than 1 house per acre. He was adamant that that was not true.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of this will really help too.
Yeah.
But put some data behind, you know.
Some data to show
Yeah,
to
and that's-
our residents.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so good to look at these as really a you know, if you're making this recommendation in the general plan, you have something to point to that's like, here's the analysis, you know, going even further to what that recommendation says, so.
And then, you know, Nate Dowgs and conservation districts around the state, conservancy districts around the state are really promoting water-wise landscaping ordinances and conservation measures. And they have targets of up to 25% reduction through better watering practices and landscape planting practices and so forth, better fixtures. And that if those applied across the board between scenarios, then we see a reduction, an additional reduction. And that's really significant given the unfortunate kind of drought cycles that we're experiencing. So that just gives you a flavor of the information that's compared, and it's just explorative, but real in terms of real choices and benefits and opportunities.
Yeah, and I'll share as well too. So we worked with Zion's Bank to do the cost of services model. They did the full analysis there, and just wanted to, Susie Becker provided this sort of, I just got this in an email from her, kind of a,
Up here.
right, that there. But if we want to kind of define, she sent me this just short little blurb that said, The factors that showed the greatest positive impacts to the county include the following types of development. And so this is based on the cost of services analysis that she did, which you see right in front of you on the screen. So those were commercial development, higher home prices and valuation for tax purposes, development in geographic locations closer to existing core services, and higher density development. And development factors which generally did not provide positive fiscal impacts to the county include lower value residential development, development in geographic locations further removed from core service areas, and lower density development removed from core services.
Yep, Susie's cost of service model was, it looked more specifically at county delivery of services in the unincorporated area. But then when looking at a model that captured the cities as well for a countywide perspective, some of her methodology and her valuable understanding of the metrics behind commercial and residential impacts and fiscal and economic factors fed into the other model. So her cost of services model write-up is actually an appendix to the urban rural area assessment, as well as Horrocks Engineering provides appendix in terms of some of the existing levels of services provided by communities and some considerations there. So this is very technical and analytical, and maybe not as written as much in a narrative, but it's nonetheless going to be of interest to some folks, but more in an appendix format. And then they dive in and they start to, so here for example is water connections by community from 2010 to 2020, and get a sense of the growth there. But then they get into how does the model work? How does the cost of services model, that folks maybe don't want to get the spreadsheet sent to them and feel overwhelmed by it, but they want to know generally what the methodology is behind it, and that's provided in their appendix. But we're not overwhelming folks with too much technical information in this narrative form of the three scenarios and the background. So that's kind of where we're at, and it's coming together rapidly, and but it's lagging behind the level of readiness that the general plan and the regional collaboration plan are. But they're pretty much 2 in 1.
The other two parts of that circle, like how it
Yeah.
showed that as 4 parts, the two are really connected. The urban and rural is connected with the cost of services.
And I would describe them as collaboration and implementation tools is what they are. They invite exploration of what the next ordinances and policies at the city and county zoning levels should be. Is trying to define how those annexation areas do grow, might grow.
Great.
So we'll keep after it and send you the updates as they come.
So we'll plan on, next Thursday, I've noticed is that there'll be a public hearing on the general plan. And so affected entities have been noticed as well. What that is required by state code. And so you as the planning commission obviously will have the decision next Thursday at the public hearing to, either move the plan forward. I think we need to think through a little bit more in terms of how we, in terms of motions, and if they can all go separately, if one moves forward, and what makes the most sense there.
Yeah, and it
So-
could be a continuation, and then you've gotten a good read on the general plan, regional collaboration plan, and then maybe in the next continued hearing, you could take a deeper dive in the third component.
But knowing
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we're
I
not the
mean,
final step either. City
True,
council's the
true,
final step.
and the public hearing is a process. We've got to open it up to public comment, but then we close it, and then we move on about our business. And that business can be, or will be at some point,
Right,
recommending adopting
right.
to the county council. And that may or may not happen next Thursday. But we don't have to come back the following month and have another public hearing. We can, we've done our public hearing.
Correct.
Right.
Public
And we
hearing
can
may-
focus on our work if it goes beyond next week, I think.
Unless as long as there's not substantial changes to it.
Right.
Public hearing may bring up stuff that we had not anticipated,
Right.
and we may go back to the drawing board.
Right. So one of the questions I had for staff is, have the documents been published, for the public to access?
That's something that I will do. We are kind of waiting for feedback this evening, kind of these last minute edits, and tomorrow I plan on making them a digital. I just wanted to get if there was any revisions this evening and then posting it tomorrow.
Mostly there were a few typos in there to clean up, and
Yeah,
these last
nothing
plans, I think
significant.
there's some significant work that needs to be done on those with the flow. Just the limited amount that I've looked at these, I think there's some work that needs to be done there, but the general plan, I feel pretty
I
confident.
got through the whole general plan. I did not get through the whole collaboration one.
Right, and knowing that it was going to be a lot to ask the governing, have you guys make a decision on four elements at one time. I just thought at least being able to bring some to you in draft form so you at least understood the whole picture instead of just moving one at a time. So if it ends up
Just
that
in the title of something and I have no idea what makes it up.
right. So if next week at the public hearing it makes sense, general plan feels good, and we can, and the rest can follow after that too. So just whatever the planning commission feels comfortable with
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah, I this has been helpful to get a good sense of what each of the documents are presenting to us, and understanding how they relate to each other, and in some cases inform each other and that sort of thing. So, yeah, clearly the general plan is more polished, and these other documents are still in process. So. So we'll see how next Thursday goes. I mean, I'm sure it's not the only item on the agenda, right?
Angie,
And so,
There's a lot on the agenda for sure.
yeah,
Were there
so,
items on the plan that we wanted, that any of us see need of revision, or where does that take place? Does that take place after the hearing? We want to make changes and revision?
as long as they're minor, that
Yeah.
can happen.
Yeah, and that could happen on Thursday. If on Thursday you decide you want to make a
How kind of a plan, how we want to handle it?
yeah, I think on Thursday, what I would expect, we open the public hearing,
See what they-
see if there's, folks that want to talk about it, and then it comes back to us, and we talk about it. We will have digested all of these documents, and I think we'll have the opportunity to raise concerns if we have concerns with anything. Minor edits are, not really important to me. It's more, gosh, I really have a problem with this, right? And if there's, some of that or enough of that, we say, hey, here's our input, come back to us with some edits, on these important areas, and we continue the discussion at the next meeting. But if we don't have anything significant, I mean, certainly we could move things along.
Sure.
Does that sound reasonable to you all?
As we review, I imagine each of us will probably dive into these, especially the additional plans throughout the next week. We send emails with suggested edits or.
Yeah, and you guys just have a copy of the PDF, so I will send a copy of a Word document instead, if that's an easier way to edit, or if you can provide comments on the PDF, whatever is easiest way to edit for the plan.
I'll just stay a minute tonight if you want to go through
Okay.
a few that I found.
Great. Yeah, or if you redline a paper document too, I'll take that as well. So whatever's easiest. But an email would be nice to inform me too that you went in and made changes, so I know to go back and look at the revision. So
Tim, I'm excited for this housing and collaboration and with this between the cities, because we have I come to these meetings and we struggle for how small people want to, you know, make those lots. They wanna go A10 to A5 to the RU2 or, in our city, we have people that want to keep the bigger sizes. But I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to live like the county, but have the services of a city. And they like the feel of Hyde Park because it feels like county to them, and it used to be county. But as far as a city is concerned, you know, you talk about reducing that infrastructure length. Yeah, what we do as a city is roads. Every square foot costs money, and water pipe and sewer pipe, and so,
And one area will subsidize another.
yeah, and so I want to tell them, go to the county. And I come to these meetings and I'm like, go to your city, you know, because you want to develop smaller, go to your city. And yet back at Hyde Park City, I'm saying, you belong in the county. Where we're doing our general plan now, and I was happy that we're using rural community consultants helping. And they defined we only have 2 zones, ½ acre and 1 acre. But we have a bonus density that takes the ½ acre down to 1/3 acre. But that's the smallest that we allow right now. But I appreciated that rural community consultants defined our acre zone as ag, which it is, A1, that's agricultural 1 acre, meaning that it's for like agriculture and farm animals. And so, and those aren't the ones I struggle with, because they're not trying to water the whole thing. The ones I struggle with are the ones who want this acre property, but they're landscaping the whole thing like a golf course. And so it's not a fit. You know, but they want the curb gutter sidewalk too. They want everything neat and pristine.
And that's not going to bring employees to these companies that want to grow in our county. So the diversity of housing will be very much a focus of these scenarios. And then all of these associated metrics, the water, the infrastructure. I failed to mention, I'm glad you spoke because it reminded me that the model, these are 3 scenarios captured in a document, but then the model can explore anything with any community as an ongoing tool for the countywide planning program.
I love that, because we can run those numbers and I can show it to them. This is why we're saying no. Or please bring something different.
Great, well, we'll keep after it. Staffing loss has been a little bit of a factor here, but we'll keep moving forward. Thank you.
Anything else, staff?
I think that's everything. Thank you so
Okay.
much for the time.
Just curious, Angie, can you give us a heads up on next week's?
The agenda should be in the shared drive right now.
Oh, it's already here?
Yeah, and it's on the website, but there is a subdivision, 2 rezones, 2 CUPs, further discussion on recreational facilities and site grading.
Okay.
And now the general plan.
And the general plan, yes, how could I forget that?
RU2 rezone requests?
Good.
What are the CUPs?
One is the Hobbled Dog Cidery, so it's our first use type, it's a winery use. And then,
Fun.
One is fairly minor, it's the Providence City Cemetery, is just doing expansion, they're actually.
Sound bad?
If you didn't
No.
hear that right, the hobbled dog, which is a very interesting name.
Hobbled
Yeah.
dog.
Maybe a 3-legged dog runs the farm. I don't know.
Where's that at?
That was-
It's a Paradise Haven.
Okay.
Not in your backyard. Just kidding.
It is.
I know, that's how I feel.
Bring it.
Any other questions for staff, commissioners, or otherwise?
I just have too many things going on, and so I'm actually dropping this position. But I'll stay on for
Linda.
a bit until they
You've
can
been
find
too
a
good.
replacement.
I have really appreciated
think-
your input.
Oh, thank you. I-
Because we've got,
Absolutely.
you know, we've got a businessman down here who's looking for the growth that he needs, and for you to come in and give us perspective of the city and how it's affecting you, what rural things are going on, and, I think you've been a great asset to this.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned a ton. I know
You
I'm
have to
very
officially
outspoken,
ask
but
for that, and you haven't.
well,
It is not a
I
permit.
did tell David Zook, who's the one who asked me, and I agreed with David Zook, so he's the one that I
I haven't.
gave notice to.
He didn't call me yet.
What do you think, at the end of the
You
year?
have to be on the commission longer than
I know, it's just been, just barely over a year, I
Mr.
know.
Sands here.
So if I go to the end of the year, I can, I need to be a mom and a wife and I only work part-time. I don't know why I can't do it, but it's just too many
I
things.
think,
There is a thing like
I think-
Chris is facing, Chris has been here forever, they fire you and hire you back cheaper.
Cheaper than the 15, that's pretty good, Nolan.
so how long, until you leave us?
I can do whatever, it's just a matter of like
You've
clearing
given
my
notice,
plate.
and
Yes, I just need to.
You're here until you're replaced.
Whatever,
Well,
3
within
years.
reason, I know, because I've heard about some of you guys.
I was saying December, let's get into the new, I mean, really, that's how.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it would be lovely if
Yeah.
if it worked
I
out
could-
that,
September, I mean.
I could finish out the year.
or anything that we've started. You have to be here long enough to
You
finish.
know what's, I think, scaring her? If we just guaranteed she wouldn't be the chair next year, I think she'd stay longer.
Right, that's a good idea, yeah.
I
Well,
do not like that, but
we-
that's not
We
why.
promise.
We vote on that in December, you haven't even had the pleasure yet,
I
so-
know,
Okay, well, between now and the end of the
Anyway.
year,
But
maybe I'll.
thank you all, like, thank you, it's been so good, and you've all welcomed me, and, yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate your hard work and dedication, that's for sure, so. Anything else?
You won't get Twizzlers anymore though. For
We
snack.
will.
I know, that's, I mean, I weighed that.
I wanna know where you found those. I tried to buy nibs.
Okay, anything else, commissioners?
Where at? Costco.
Anything else? We good? Okay, without objection, we'll adjourn.
Nolan?